really need to standardize what the names that we put on the bottomless thing. I'm not sure the connection works this time. And oh yeah, YouTube has us on a 30-second delay. Fantastic. So yeah, Tech Poutine. This is our weekly podcast with me, Potato, and George the Cheese. Let's I don't know. It's last week I was in the Bay Area, and we were able to do it relatively time zone. Today, George woke up early, so it's a time zone more applicable to me.
Yeah.
And next week we'll be doing it in person. So it's we'll both be attending AMD's AI Everywhere event that we spoke about last week on the Tech
Advancing AI, I think.
AI Everywhere, Advancing AI.
Advancing AI.
Oh,
Too much AI.
Not enough AI. Woo! Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so I'm now back home. Didn't catch. Luckily, grazed a storm going out and grazed a storm coming back. So it's going to be part of what we talk about on the show today. Just because some stuff's come up to do with supply chain and weather effects and also some other things coming in. Last week I was in town for TSMC's conference, so I'm going to speak a little bit about what they announced. My video is 70% done for that. We've got some interviews still to process. Just short 30-second stuff speaking to people with IP, and I have strawberries. No cheese this time, George.
Yeah, no, for just coffee. Too early for cheese, but So Davina Duckworth brings up Hurricane Helene. As some of you may know, one of the big sort of stand-up folks in this community, the tech community, LGR, Lazy Game Reviews, his house was badly damaged during the hurricane. Two what looked like oak trees went straight through his roof. And it was like not dead wood, like full on root system was pulled out and just smacked straight into his house. He's okay, thankfully. He's safe. Unfortunately, it sounds like a lot of his collection was damaged. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about the hurricane that hit all up and down the southwest of the U.S.
I saw Jeff Geerling post about it online.
And as you may remember, I'm from Northwest Florida. Northwest Florida.
Do you still have family there?
I grew up there. Luckily, all my family has either passed or are no longer in Northwest Florida
area. Yeah.
So I don't know anyone there.
I mean, yeah, it's there's talk about weather patterns, getting stuff like that being more frequent, especially in the US. I mean, it's weird, right? In Europe, if we want sun, I mean, UK is not in the EU, so besides the point, it's either south coast of France, or it's Spain, or it's Greece, or it's Italy, and the weather systems there are obviously not as violent as the US, right? So even though you may live in Florida, or you're in that sort of panhandle area sort of thing, Hurricane Alley, is that, or Tornado Alley, is that what they call it?
Tornado Alley is the Midwest. Hurricane Alley is sort of southeast coast of the U.S.
Yeah. So we want to speak about some of the news that's going around on there. from TSMC, AMD's got some too. Llama 3.2 was just announced.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to cover that. I think the big top nail.
Ian, every so often your upload your connection, it like stops and then like it's buffering and then quickly sort of catches up.
Yeah.
Just to let you know. And it happened again.
It's fine. I have no idea what's going on. Perhaps it's the weather. Perhaps it's the weather. Perhaps it's the weather. It's always got to be an issue here, isn't there? But the big topic that I put in the thumbnail is to do with Cerebras. They announced their. It just happened again, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. It's getting more frequent. Yes.
Let's see if I can knock down my camera resolution yet again. See if that's an issue. So Cerebras, they filed IPO. Well, they announced they're filing IPO a few weeks ago. The S1 has now been, showcased. So we can go through some of the details about what an AI startup having an IPO looks like. Mm-hmm. I've been reading through the document today, and there's a few key points I want to pull out there. I also found some new research about Waferscale, and then we got a couple of backup topics, depending on how long we go for. So, okay, that seems to have done a bit better. Next time, don't stream on 4K on crappy London 8020, because I've probably said this before, but I'm on the worst area of London for internet.
And it was funny because Frontier just announced that I could get 7 up, 7 down.
Yeah.
For an exorbitant price. It's absolutely insane. But I could get 7 gigabits up and down.
7 pigeons up, 7 pigeons down, maybe. Okay, people are rolling in. Glad you could all start to join us. Let's get this show on the road. We haven't changed topics yet, Don. We haven't even started. It's yep, there we go. Let's change the banner to the right one. So welcome everybody to another episode of the Tech Poutine, your one weekly shop for all things tech news and it's just basically what we like to talk about kind of thing. Mm-hmm. My name's Ian, I'm Potato, and joining me is
George, and I'm the cheese.
And if we had a guest, they would be the gravy. No guest, unfortunately, this show. We may end up getting a guest next week because George and I will be having one of our shows in person because we'll both be in the Bay Area for AMD's AI event, which is next week. No preview on that event. However, we do have some interesting AMD news coming up. And I said on the pre-show, we've got some TSMC, we've got some weather, got some AI, and we've got some AI IPOs. Cerebras, the title topic in the thumbnail, just filed their S1, so we have some visibility into how much money these AI companies are making.
Do you want to start with
some?
Yeah. Do you want to start with the TSMC event and just go on from there?
Yeah, let's see how this goes, if I can get this system up and running. So TSMC has an event every year. Well, they do it all around the world, right? It's like in 6 different venues. They have their technology symposium, which is in the first half of the year, and then the second half of the year they have the Open Innovation Platform, OIP. That's what I was in the Bay Area last week to attend. And I mentioned at the top of the video in the pre-show that I'm about 70% done with the video, going over their announcements. We've got some interview segment in there, and OIP historically has been kind of like the packaging conference, right? We have the tech symposium is the logic, and then OIP is the packaging. It's working out differently these days. Tech Symposium does both, and OIP is a lot for the partners, but they still make like some announcements. And going to a TSMC event in itself is quite rare. In my years and years and years of being in this industry, it's only the last 2 or 3 where I've actually got to attend TSMC events. And funnily enough, they sponsor some videos. They don't do that with anybody else. I kind of know why, but I kind of don't know why anybody else is involved in that. I guess they trust me. TSMC trust me? Not with wafer allocation. I mean,
they trust you enough to let you eat some wafers.
Yeah, so that's a weird thing. I've got a feeling that TSMC headquarters don't understand my whole wafer biting thing. And I'm like, no, it's a shtick. It's a meme. You get
it's a joke. It's not.
It's a joke.
I really eat wafers.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's some good people on the team there. I work with TSMC directly and through the PR agency. There is a small cultural barrier, as you might imagine. Every Taiwanese company has a small cultural barrier for anybody from the West. That's just a given. But we're learning to work with each other, and it's actually quite fun. Fingers crossed that next time we're in Taipei, we can do a tech Poutine from TSMC's foyer. I have already floated the idea. Initially we said in the building, and I got this. Oh no, we don't allow cameras in the fabs. I'm like, no, the foyer. Apparently it's got to a point now where they will, if you're outside the fab taking pictures, a security guard will come out and ask you to stop.
I know exactly who caused that too.
Yeah. But OIP, Open Innovation Platform, they had 3 announcements at the show that are worth talking about. Right. If you follow my content, my channel, you'll know about the roadmap for TSMC. We've got this N3, N3E sort of family of process nodes. Then you've got the N2, N2P, and then the A16. And it's the N2 that's getting gate all around, and it's A16 that's getting buried power rail, or their version of buried power rail. That's what Intel's putting both of them into 20A. TSMC's separating them out and doing them separately. And the benefits of each: gate all around, higher performance, power, better VT characteristics, and buried power rail, a better separation of power signal, the power wires and the data wires, so you don't get crosstalk. It adds a bit of expense to it. It all adds expense to it. But the idea is that we get better chips down the line, process node advancements, that sort of thing. The first big announcement for OIP is verified flows. So normally you have PDKs for these sorts of things to do with chip design, but then you've also got multi-physics and validation and test and debug and all the sort of things that you put naturally into a design flow. TSMC has now got verified flows for that. So for all the companies doing those chip designs, and bet your bottom dollar, there's like probably 50 designs on N2 already started, if not more. And then, dozens on A16 already. So it's that process of getting the end-to-end flows. And, announcement 1 of IP is basically, what we said a year ago, we're moving along that path. So it's basically, yes, we're putting one foot in front of the other, and it's making us go. So nothing accelerated, nothing decelerated. They had some interesting graphs on that. I actually have some numbers that I can share if I pull them up, if Evernote decides to load. Yeah. Okay, so so what we see. Let me get these numbers right. because they're a bit all
Everybody
over.
get your pens out. Get your pens out and prepare.
So TSMC are saying that at 0.55 volts, A16 can run at double the frequency of N7.
Say that again.
At 0.5,
I think my brain stopped for a second when you said that.
At 0.55 volts, they can run at double the frequency of N7 on A16.
That's impressive.
At 0.75 volts, it's 70%.
Okay, so it does go down as you increase in voltage, which makes sense.
Yeah. Basically, they're saying that N3 and N2 have better speed and power scaling at lower voltage. But the thing is, going to smaller process node, you have a lower Vmin anyway. The point is, the chip in your laptop doesn't sit running at 0.75 volts. It'll boost up to 1 and 1.2 to get more frequency out. So here, we're talking the difference between 800 megahertz and 1600 megahertz, but at the 0.55 volts. A16 is 30% more efficient than N2 and 11% more dense.
That's not great.
No, so the thing they wanted to point out, I think, is between N2P and A16, so that's the buried power rail transition, don't expect a density increase. Even though buried power rail is meant to provide you with density uplift, they're saying don't expect one because it's basically easing in, right? You will make design choices with buried power rail that will help improve density, but the technology itself doesn't inherently improve density. Right?
Okay.
So that's all with gate all around. And they did say that with N3, with the nanoflex, this bit where you fin depopulate to help get better density and better energy efficiency. They've actually quantified that now for N3. I'm going to have to create an article up on more-more.com on this. But they're expecting A16 volume in late 26, early 27. So it's they only spoke about, say, like N2P, N3E, and A16. There are other variants like N2X, I think, maybe. That will be optimized for all sorts of things. But they're saying, new place and route algorithms for DTCO on N3, N2, and A16, and they're speeding that cycle up. Okay. So the rate of development of approving EDA tools is also increasing.
Okay.
So that was the main announcement at OIP. The second big one was more AI in EDA. So
wow, what a shock! I'm truly surprised.
So AI and chip design. They actually had Google's one of their VP of Silicon Engineering as part of the keynote there, and he was talking about the drive to bring machine learning into chip design, but they're doing it in two ways, right? One is the easy way, one is the obvious way, and that's optimizing a layout. Right, minimizing for wire delay, minimizing for power, optimizing for frequency, minimizing for area. The standard banana plot curves we've seen on and on. The second one is large language model based, and it's helping chip designers write Verilog, making chip designers build tests, improve validation. Or you pick up somebody else's library design, and then you use the model to say, what does this library design do? So it's a model trained on the dynamics of chip design, or maybe specialized in cache or specialized in this, that, and the other. And you can essentially ask it questions about the design to go build tests. So it's coming on two fronts. It's one, how do you make it so the expert isn't needed in the room? And two, how do you make it better? The example they gave is in one design, what would have taken 15 expert days took one junior day. And people are saying, what about our jobs? What does this mean for jobs? And this just means people are going to be upskilling how to use these tools better, how to be more important earlier in the career.
I see it more as, so let's take somebody we're going to be talking about later, AMD, right? Let's say they have 100 people working on project A, right? Let's say that's Zen 6 or whatever. If they can reduce the number of hours that you need by half, then they could take, say, half of those people and reallocate them to, say, UDNA 6 or some GPU.
Or just make it
resources.
Or make it better.
Yeah, or make it better, right? It's going to be reallocation of resources, not a job hit, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's now there are counter arguments to this. It's does machine learning in the flow create unexpected issues? Okay, so for example, one of the things you have to do is write proper tests and validation tests for this, because all the machine learning will do is optimize for the test case, not the general case.
Yes.
So your test case has to be, sufficient. So yeah, the announcement was, more integration with Synopsys, Cadence, Siemens, and Ansys to, better align simulation and machine learning and chip design. And they were saying, some of their new multi-physics AI tools are within 3% of reality. They did mention package warping, that may or may not affect Blackwell. They didn't state Blackwell by name, but that definitely did come up. And a third announcement from TSMC, the OIP, is 3D blocks. Have you ever heard of 3D blocks, George?
No, I've heard of the 3D fabric.
Yeah, so 3D fabric is all about packaging. 3D blocks is all about getting it all to work together.
Okay.
So we're talking thermals, we're talking electrical, we're talking control, we're talking packaging, we're talking about the underlying standards to make sure everybody's speaking the same language, but meeting the same requirements. So you could say, well, isn't that UCIe or something? No, this is like a superset of all of that. TSMC's been running 3D blocks, I think 3 years now, because it's a process, right? Normal EDA chip design, you design a chip, and then you start a new project, and then you design a new chip. Thing is, if you have two projects, how do the physics work together? How do the electricals work together? How do the simulations?
And it's going to change depending on what the project is, right?
Yeah.
Because a SRAM cell may not produce as much heat as a logic cell, which could cause different deformations in the different silicon levels, as well as within the packaging and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, and you may end up with a localized brownout in your power, let alone logic differential signaling or whatever. So that's what 3D blocks is set out to solve. I think they're on 3D blocks 3.0, and the main focus for 2.0 was actually going 3D.
Okay.
It's more about 3D than, say, 2.5D, for example. So there were some discussions about logic on logic and how to solve that, and doing that through 3D blocks. The news at the show was that they're essentially integrating it into IEEE as an IEEE standard. So it has like a P3537, I think it is. P3537. It's currently under authorization review at IEEE. Should be certified by the end of the year. The whole point is they want other people to come in and innovate in this space, and it not just be held up by TSMC. In the same way we've seen other standards roll out into more ecosystem variants, things like USB, things like UCIe, and Infinity Fabric becoming UA Link and that sort of stuff. So Thunderbolt technically, but kind of not really. Yeah,
that's a fuzzy one. So speaking
that's all fun. I'm going to have I should have an article about it. So
speaking of AMD, do you want to cover AMD on Oracle first, or the small language model?
Yeah. Let's go on Oracle first. So we always speak about how many chips does a proper cluster need, right? Whenever we speak to companies like NVIDIA, like AMD, like Intel, they always say, oh, our chips, you have 8 in a box and you have 80 in a rack, and you can scale this to how many racks, and here's our ML perf results, and here's our LinPack results, and here we are in the top 500. You go to a company and they might say, oh, what's the smallest? What's the biggest you could support? And then, or how much is your revenue going to be? And everybody tries to work out how many chips that means and whatever. So one of the biggest MI300X installations in the world that we know, two that we know of are Frontier.
No. So MI300X so the two biggest cloud users are Oracle and Azure, with Meta also buying MI300Xs. MI300A is
that's right.
Is El Capitan.
Okay.
It is a different product, at least in terms of what it does.
So that Azure installation is OpenAI.
We don't know. We assume so.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Well, it's OpenAI, and then they do have it on Azure Cloud as well.
And so you think, how many chips must they have? Because they're talking about buying hundreds of thousands of NVIDIA chips. Well, this week, Oracle announced through Oracle Cloud Infrastructure that they will be implementing MI300X with ROCm in a new super cluster instance called MI300X.8 for AI models with hundreds of billions of parameters. We're getting to some more models. However, the supercluster supports up to 16,384 GPUs in a single cluster. I don't want to know what the instance cost.
Oh boy!
Of that many, it's how much does a GPU cost an hour? $10? $2.
Depending on who you're getting it from, let's say about $3 an hour.
$3 an hour. Yeah. Okay. So this is 50
grand.
Either you can buy a couple of chips, or you can have an hour on a 16th. Mind you need a couple of hours just to feed all the weights in to get the chips ready, I guess.
I think something that isn't said here is, okay, there's 16,000 GPUs in a single cluster, but how many clusters can you actually spin up? Because I guarantee you it's more than one.
Yeah, it's. I was doing some envelope math, right? Because that's what you do in this situation.
Oh yeah.
And we don't know how much these chips are selling for. Estimates range anywhere from 10 to 35, 40K each.
I've been hearing numbers around 25.
Okay, so I picked 20.
Okay.
And I said, how much revenue is just that single cluster for AMD? And it's 330 million, right? A third of $1 billion. AMD is saying they're going to make $4.5 billion in revenue this year from AI, but that's like the whole segment of AI. That's including services, that's including switches, that's including FPGA for AI, whatever. So yeah, even if they have 3 clusters, that's $1 billion. But also, that's 16,000 chips using TSMC's CoWoS. And we know CoWoS is in limited supply.
Well, it's not just
CoWoS.
It's not just CoWoS. It's also info and 3D stacking.
but there's less of a constraint on that, I think. But either way, it's I wanted to pick this out because the number is interesting. It's justifying more use of AMD in the space. We already know that OpenAI prefers AMD for inference because it's 10% cheaper per token versus an NVIDIA solution. We know that MI300X supports multiple users, concurrently, and you can batch it up, and you can get the trade-off between throughput and flow. And with cloud, it's all about keeping things active, keeping users happy, and maintaining uptime. So I don't often see much talk about Oracle Cloud just in general, because people who use Oracle Cloud tend to not speak a lot, but they are one of the major cloud providers. It's you got your big ones. You've got your Amazon Web Services, AWS. You've got your Azure, and then you've got your tier 2, and then Google Cloud, and then you've got your tier 2s like IBM and Oracle, and then you've got your tier 3s, which is more localized. Sometimes we put tier 1 and tier 2 together, but and they're talking about how many AI models are supported. That goes with the improvements in the software stack as well. You and I both know we're at ROCm 6.2, and it's getting better.
6.22.
Yeah, it's getting better. But the people who this is aimed for already know how to use it inside and out. So, it's Circuit Rewind says NVIDIA and Oracle team up for Zetascale cluster. It's everybody who's deploying AMD is definitely all deploying NVIDIA, right? It's just, I think this is outside of OpenAI. This is, I think, one of the biggest single, biggest instance sizes I've seen. I've seen 16,000.
The one who hasn't spoke about the cluster sizes is Meta, and they're ironically enough, I think, in terms of number of GPUs ordered, on par with Azure, who is like, both of them are. It's so strange for Meta, because Meta doesn't talk about all their infrastructure on the back end, but they have some massive infrastructure. Like, they could become a cloud at the drop of a hat if they really wanted to, from what I understand. Right? And they just don't talk about it. So,
well, they're too busy dealing with people's data. And then another small bit of AMD AI news is that AMD is making its own models. It's I've spoken a little bit on the channel that making models can be difficult. It costs money. Training is like a big chunk of compute. You need to know how many chips you need for how much length of time. So making models and making them available is difficult, right? This is why you only have so many open source super large models. The thing is, AMD is obviously optimizing, but is now building the models optimized for AMD. So in this case, it's a small language model with 135 million parameters.
So I was talking with somebody at CNC who knows a lot more about AI models, and what they said is that it's for using as a draft model for speculative decoding. So basically, this is running in front of your LLM and trying to predict tokens, and that's what this is used for. This is not to be used solo.
It's what back, I think it was a few months before Hot Chips, actually. One of the big AI companies was having an event, and they were talking about how it's easier to run a small model multiple times than a big model once. Right? So what you do is you run the small model a number of times, and then you do a very quick statistical check to make sure it's the right. Or it's the right thing. And you only use the big model if you have to. So you end up having a chain of bigger and bigger models, that you only need to if you actually need to. So you don't pay the penalty in power, in latency. So having small language models in front of this makes, especially on the edge side, right? If you can do it, if you can do the work on device without having to go to the cloud, I mean, it's the whole concept behind AIPC, right? Yeah. We are so used to speaking about 7 billion and 8 billion parameter models because they fit on notebooks. Mm-hmm. But there's a world of sub 1 billion parameter models out there. That being said, they don't perform great.
Right? No, they don't.
But you request them enough times, and eventually they at least point in the right direction.
And the whole theory behind it is the small model will be accurate 80% of the time, and that's good enough. Mm-hmm. Because then you can then go to the large LLM when you're wrong, and sort of do the checking and whatnot.
Either that, or it's just a small decision model that points you in the right direction to go.
Yeah.
Which could be an if then else statement, but sometimes everything needs AI.
Oh look, the AI space is reinventing branch predictors.
Yeah.
Not quite.
I know, but even branch predictors used machine learning trained statistical models, right?
Yeah.
So so AMD's 135M, small language model for the Llama family that was trained from scratch on MI250 using 670 billion tokens, and they've got a standard model and a code model. So obviously code specific LLMs are quite popular. It's I think I was speaking to Jim Keller a couple of years ago, and he said at that time 80% of the time they're 80% correct, or is it 60% of the time they're 60% correct? Either way, it's got better since. So yeah, and they've even put the code and the data set and the final weights. So if you want to go recreate the model from scratch, they can. And optimization with speculative decoding. It talks about how large language models work, and how each forward pass can only generate a single token. That's what gives them their low efficiency. And speculative decoding basically tries to improve the output. So it allows each forward pass to generate multiple tokens. And next step, people can go download this at the AMD GitHub. Apply for Instinct Accelerator Card access on the AMD Developer Cloud. Have you got that, George? You need to do more AI.
Let's just say that I would like AMD to make the developer cloud much easier to access. And I'll just put it at that.
Okay. This means you have some experience. Let's go from this onto the main topic of the day. Because this is the, and let's get over these GDPR. AI chip maker Cerebras. So they're the big Waferscale people. Do I have my Waferscale chip? It's not this motherboard. There you go.
Nom noms. Many nom noms will have been had from that chip.
Yeah, it's not a real one. It's one of the metallic display type things that you stick on the wall. So, Cerebras, the company that makes the dinner plates, the big AI chips. We reported a few weeks ago that they filed for IPO. What's different this time is that they've actually the S1 filing, which gives all the details, is now ready to read. CNBC goes over some of the highlights here. So they will have the CBRS ticker symbol. They've had losses, a net loss of 66.6 million. That's nice and unholy in the first 6 months of 24 on 136.4 million of sales. So their revenue is 136 million, but they've still lost 66 million. Why might that be?
I mean, my guess is either they're putting that money back into R&D and they're having to spend more than they're making for R&D, or
it's all R&D,
or they're loss leading some stuff.
No, for a chip that costs a couple mil, around about. Yeah, no, it's not loss leading, that's for sure.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
the chip
R&D.
might cost $1 million, but how much does it to make the chip and everything around the chip and the server around the chip, right? Because they're going fully.
Oh yeah, that's the cost of sale, right?
Yeah.
And once again, my internet's playing up. I can tell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Your internet is.
And so, yeah, I've done a number of videos on Cerebras, and their big thing is that they signed a massive contract with G42, Group 42 Holdings, a UAE-based AI firm that is technically part owned by Microsoft. But that one company accounted for 83% of Cerebras' revenue last year, which is a good and a bad thing. It's good.
I don't think that's particularly healthy.
That they're making sales.
No, it's good that they're making sales, but I don't know if it's healthy that 83% of their sales are to one company.
Yeah, it's it's a standard thing is that you don't want to put too many eggs into one basket. It's I think for AMD's last financial, they said, was it 15% of revenue comes from one customer, sort of thing?
Yeah.
That sort of it's when somebody supplies a chip to Apple for one of their devices, and it turns out to be 90% of the company's revenue, or they get a licensed IP for graphics, I don't know. And you don't, and I've been covering Cerebras for years. Founded in 2016, based in Sunnyvale. Andrew Feldman is the CEO. He co-founded C Micro. Not sure if you remember C Micro.
I vaguely, I do remember they were brought up by AMD and then sort of died.
Yeah, it's
like that. They didn't have the money to continue that.
Yeah, C Micro was focused very much at, for edge servers and stuff. And then there's also at the time when AMD was going new. So Andrew has created and exited a number of companies. They said at 2021 it was valued at over $4 billion. I think they've raised something like $700 million in funding. And in the filing, it turns out that G42 is actually committed to 1.4 billion of orders before March 25. And people turn around to me and say, "Oh, but they're an investor. So is it really a purchase, or is it more of an investment?" But G42 only owns 5%, less than 5%. It does have some option to buy, which causes a bit of dilution, but they are not in any way the biggest, investors.
No.
If to say they've got sub 5%, to say that the sale is to an investor, yes, so it's still a sale, right?
Now, if it's like the investor owns 90% of a company, okay, then it starts getting into the weeds. But yeah, when it's up 5%. It's a sale.
Yeah, it's the the firms involved in this. Foundation Capital, Benchmark, Eclipse Ventures, Alpha Wave, Curtu, Altimeter. Other investors include Sam Altman and Andy Bechtolsheim. The only individual who owns 5% or more is Feldman. I actually think that's wrong, because that's probably too difficult to see. So I'll bring up the S1 filing, and I'll dump a link into the chat if that'll post. Yeah, okay. And we need to go. I'm going to scroll very quickly here. So page 15 is like the summary of the financial data. Let's see if I can get this even bigger on screen. Yeah. So it says this year, to date, 6 months, they've sold 104 million of hardware and 32 million in services for a total revenue of 136 million. Okay, that's cool. The hardware costs 66 million. That's cost of sale. Services cost 14 million.
Yeah, 14 for total.
So your gross profit is 56. That's what, a 40% margin. And yeah, they spent 77.7 million on R&D. If you include sales and marketing, general administrative, best part of 100 million on operating expenses, and that's where you get the loss from. But if this is the first. If we look at 2023, they sold half as much in twice the time. So
yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, and if you think about all the AI companies that cover 100, getting money to get to an IPO is pretty good. There's like 20 pages of risk factors here. And it basically says we have a complex supply chain. If that's fucked, we're fucked. If TSMC goes down, we're screwed.
To be fair, that's a large part of this entire industry at this point.
Yeah. If tariffs gets put on stuff, we're going to be screwed. Both the US and China have national programs directed towards influencing the future of global semiconductor industry, and it's hard to predict. We need raw materials. We're dependent on third-party suppliers.
Yes.
Our products are complex, and therefore there may be delays, defects, or bugs, or security vulnerabilities. But it says WS3.
You just skipped something.
Repeated history, so that's fine.
Go back up.
More?
Up. It was in bold. Continue up. No, it was up more. You skipped right past it. Let's see if I can find it here.
I'll keep going through. Failure at tape out, new developments in AI, cloud-based stuff has risk. Pricing often decreases over time. If customers do not keep buying or expand purchases, we may be affected. Sales cycles can be unpredictable. This is all pretty standard boilerplate stuff, to be honest, for companies using complex. Many of our suppliers, including our sole source of wafers, are located in areas of high geopolitical tension, such as Taiwan and South Korea, or in areas prone to natural disasters, such as earthquakes or typhoons. Adverse macro.
Page 30. Page 30, quote, we have experienced and may continue to experience difficulties in transitioning to more advanced process node technologies and in developing advanced packaging solutions.
Yeah, they're using leading edge technologies up and down. So it's going to be difficult.
I just found that interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need significant resources to develop techniques for power delivery and cooling. We need to continue investing in these areas to remain competitive.
Mm-hmm.
If we reach the limits of being able to power cool or provide I/O, or if we encounter other complexities, we would need to develop alternate solutions. Yeah. Then we've got some of the compliance with government regulation. They need to provide support. Either my cats are going wild or somebody's breaking in. And then further, a significant majority of our revenue is generated from one customer headquartered in the UAE. And this is important. I won't go through exactly what it says here, but in order to work with the UAE, as in provide hardware to the UAE, you need an export license. However, pretty much everything that G42 has ordered is going to be based in the US, and you don't need a license for that. However, they are prepared to get licenses if needed. It helps the fact that Microsoft's an investor in G42. So it's going to be, it would be argued you can't have it both ways, pretty much. Yeah, the loss of one or more members of our senior management team could harm our business, including the CEO. The members of our senior management team and co-founders are at-will employees, which means that each person could resign or could be terminated for any reason at any time. Members of our senior management team, in particular Mr. Feldman, are critical to the management of our company and instrumental to the development of our technology and strategic direction.
So basically, this is saying, don't fire this person.
Well, yeah, it comes down to board members.
If somehow the board decides in their head to try it.
Yeah. Regulatory matters. This goes into US law, FTC, GDPR. There's a whole page on GDPR. Jesus God. AI, if there's we may be subject to warranty claims and product liability. Financial accounting, we may have screwed up in our finances. We may have a limited ability to use some or all of our net operating loss carry forwards in the future. Oh, that's just how much losses you can carry forward. Mm-hmm. As of December 31, 2023, we had net operating loss carry forwards for federal and state income tax purposes of $333.8 million and $395.5 million, respectively. So, yeah, in order to take advantage, we need to use them by getting revenue. Stock options. There's a couple of slides I want to showcase down here. Market and industry data. In case you're wondering where some of this data comes from on the market, artificial analysis, Bloomberg, Gartner, IDC, McKinsey, and more McKinsey. There are spaces in here where numbers should be because this is a redacted S1. And here we start talking about shares and share prices and stock. They're going to have a Class A and a Class N stock. And Class N essentially just has no voting rights, but certain individuals will be able to upgrade those to Class A at any time. RSU, restricted stock units, G42 option. So, if G42 or certain third parties at the direction of G42 purchase more than 500 million in one purchase order and less than 5 billion in aggregate of high-performance computing clusters from us, we will grant G42 the option to purchase additional shares of our Series F2 redeemable converted preferred stock, basically shares of our Class N, subject to the terms thereof. Each share of our Class N common stock is convertible at any time at the option of the holder into one share of Class A common stock. G42 has agreed to not convert its shares of Class N to Class A before July 31st, 2025. Shares may be issued pursuant to the G42 option in one or more closings. The $1.43 billion of products and services that G42 has committed to purchase pursuant to the May 24 agreement does not count towards the G42 option threshold. So the 1.4 billion that's already been reported, that has no bearing on this option. However, if G42 or partners of G42 decide to go buy more of at least 500 million, then G42 has the option to buy more shares. So it's basically giving G42 an incentive to buy more, right? It's and it's on a sliding scale as well. Exact details.
I will say that the conversion time seems a bit quick.
It is. It does. But the question, the G42 option expires if it's not achieved by the end of next year. So the whole changing from Class N to Class A happens in the mid of next year. So basically, people have to turn around, and say, we want to buy 500 million worth of, Waferscale Engine 3s, CS3s, or services related to. So I will say one thing. Even though G42 has bought like 570 Cerebras systems, they're all being stood up in the US. And part of the managed services, I think, is Cerebras actually going out and finding those locations and then managing them. So it's, let's see, this is analysis of financial condition. We have experienced rapid growth, revenue of 78.7 million and 24.6 million for the years 23 and 22. And during the last 6 months, we've generated 136 million and 8.7 in revenue, respectively. Net loss for the previous 2 years is about 300 million. But don't forget, they've raised 700. And, they're still experiencing a net loss because of R&D. Business model. Cerebras' business model consists of 3 main factors. 1, you buy our systems on premise. You buy them, they go into your data center. 2, cloud-based computing services. So we have a cloud, you can use it. Or inference cloud, which is almost the same thing, but for inference. The G42 agreement is somewhere in between these two. So it's on-premise, but also a cloud. So when G42 isn't using them, people can essentially get time on them through Cerebras Cloud. More into the whole G42 relationship here. In November 21, G42 acquired 1% ownership interest of the company by buying 1.4 million shares of Series F at $27.74 per share, resulting in about 40 million investment. And it goes through, the investment. We generated significant revenue from G42 in the year ended December 23, representing 83% of our total revenue.
Generated significant revenue is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah. We began recognizing our revenue in the third quarter of 23, so last year. We also received new purchase orders related to and services in the fourth quarter of 23. It doesn't state whether that's specifically G42, but I assume that is as well. And then, this goes through more of the sort of just because G42 is such a big customer, they have to go through into almost excruciating detail. And then, commercial relationship. Some of these systems have been prepaid and they have performance requirements, as in, if you don't stand up our systems within a certain amount of time, you can be fined.
Well, not just that. If you don't stand up and it doesn't hit certain performance metrics, you can either be fined or required to hit that performance metric at the cost of zero. Like, you will get nothing for that additional expense to you, the company, to stand that up.
And this is as a percentage of revenue. So here we have gross profit in the first 6 months this year is 41.1. R&D is 50%, 7% of revenue.
It's funny reading 2022s because it's 631%. Like,
yeah. So when your revenue is that low, that's why you have things like not meaningful. Yeah. So it's going into the numbers that we've already just seen here, giving some more color. Cost of sales, margin, sales and marketing. So here's actually a quarter by quarter breakdown. I need to go over this and actually generate some graphs. But it's showing, this is the Q3 where the cost of the revenues coming in. So even though they've bought 1.4 billion, that's 30 million plus 26 million plus 50 million plus 55 million. There's still a lot to go. I'm not sure whether prepayment is included in that or not. As of June 30th, our principal source of liquidity were cash equivalents, and investments. So as of June 30th, 2024, so as of they had 472 million in cash and cash equivalents. Restricted cash is 263 million. So that must be cash reserved for building the systems and deploying them. So
that's probably part of the prepayment.
Yeah. Operating activities. I'm going to get down to the stock levels. And here it's talking about the WSE3, largest chip ever sold. Yeah, I think they're right with that, aren't they? If you count it as a chip.
Yeah, if you count it as one single chip, then yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's talking about what AI is and how a solution works, and we've seen these slides a number of times before. This is the most recent one. About tokens per second. I actually had a chat with a company, and they were saying this is actually quite misleading. One of Cerebras' competitors, not directly, but they're saying it doesn't matter tokens per second. It matters total throughput, because you're not always going to have one user.
Yeah. That's why whenever I see batch one numbers, whenever it's specifically a cloud, like some AI for the cloud, and they're saying batch one numbers, I'm going,
Yeah. That's only useful in academia. But yeah, it's here are some examples of customer and industry impact. Unfortunately, they're not mentioning all the media coverage that they've had, but G42, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, national lab, another national lab,
that's Argonne.
A government agency. No, one of these is Oak Ridge.
So the first one was Argonne. The second one is Oak Ridge.
Yeah. Some of this, won the Gordon Bell Prize. Here's the business model.
So from what I know of that Oak Ridge announcement,
I like this graph because people always leave out these. They say this is Moore's law. What about these? And people say, it's not a chip.
Well, here's the thing. Does it actually break Moore's law? If you look at the trend lines are the same.
And also, here you're talking about how many square millimeters versus up here. Right?
Yeah. You're talking about Tidy versus Tonka.
Yeah, it's. I've had an argument with a company that's saying it's actually 47 chips or whatever it is, 48 chips, you can count them.
Mm-hmm.
And you should divide that number by that many, because that's really how many it is per die. And it's like, oh, so you're not counting cross-reticle stitching, but you are advanced packaging? So where's it's almost, you know, that image of what you would eat in an apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
You got rabbits and horses in the middle because some people won't eat them normally. It's like that, really. So it's going into some of the architecture here, more about AI, how you cool the thing and how you deliver the power. It's I think I do have some photos of that. I wasn't sure if I was able to share them or not. I've been to the Cerebras headquarters like a dozen times at this point. Competition. Our CS product line competes against solutions from NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, Microsoft, and Google, among others.
So NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, and Google, I understand, are they comparing to Maya from Microsoft? Because that's the only thing I can think of.
Well, this is just general. It's competing against what Microsoft offers. Microsoft offers NVIDIA.
Then why aren't they including AWS in here?
Because they don't see AWS as a competition. Okay. As of September 24, they had 400 employees. No union. Facilities. Legal proceedings. Okay. Executive officers and directors. So, Andrew Feldman served as CEO at C Micro. He was vice president and general manager at AMD for 2 years. He served as VP marketing and product management at Force 10 Networks, which was acquired by Dell. He was then VP corporate marketing and corporate development at Riverstone Networks, which was, I think that was acquired as well. He's also involved in the certain legal proceedings, which is quite amusing. And then we have some other people here who are part investors, part senior leadership. Apparently he was involved in a case regarding US securities laws.
Oh.
But this was like in 2008. And he was in charge of the team that apparently did it. But it was
I'm surprised he's able to. I guess it's more than 10 years.
It's also they settled the claims without admission of guilt.
Okay.
So then leadership. I want to get down to the slide. I didn't think it was this far down. Okay, so we know how much the senior executive leadership make in terms of salary. If you want to be a CEO at an AI startup in the Bay or just any C-level exec, 300, 400. But then you also
not including any stock options.
Yeah. If you add in the stock options
on the right, yeah.
Yeah. If you argue the right way, then everybody's agreement is different, right?
Yeah.
And the salaries technically went up, I think, this year. They have 401ks. This is like the stock options that they can exercise. And market value of shares or units of stock that have not vested. So this guy has like 5.5 million that haven't vested yet, but option expiry 2033. Okay. So they got some good time. But that's not, this is going through some of the definitions. There was employee stock purchase plans. So typically when you work at one of these startups, you might be, might say, oh, do you want to buy some stock in addition to the stock we're already giving you as part of your compensation. Now, obviously, it depends whether the company actually hits IPO, whether that actually becomes something, and whether you're just throwing money at it. But the idea is that because you're invested as your job and as stock options, you'll do well. Here it talks about G42's relationship and their investment and how they have the right of first refusal for some of these things. Here we go. This is how much stock is owned by individuals at the company. So you can have a look to basically see how many, what percentage of the company people own. So as CEO, Andrew has 10.6 million shares. The COO has, just shy of 2 million. This is the former CFO. These three are investor related, putting in some of their own money. But then you also have other stockholders. And here's G42. G42 doesn't hit the 5% barrier. But you can see from this that the CEO, Andrew, has just under 10% of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I thought that was just interesting because and then there's just lots of stuff. I've never gone through one of these documents properly before. I've only seen the CNBC articles,
yes,
which don't often give the full picture. I think going through and seeing the quarter by quarter and seeing where the company. So that's Andrew. If people don't know what he looks like,
I've actually never met Andrew.
There's a picture of me and him where we're both wearing Christmas jumpers.
Yes, I do remember that photo.
Yeah. We just happened to both be wearing really crappy Christmas jumpers when we were met up for, a briefing or something. So, yeah, that's IPO. And so this is the prospectus for the IPO. There's not a timeline attached to it yet. But we sooner rather than later, and it's the first big AI company to do so. Others have been acquired. And there's one other thing, just because it's still related to Waferscale. This is a paper I might do a video on. Switchless Dragonfly.
This was quite interesting.
What now? Dragonfly is a term I've heard of fairly regularly when it comes to HPC. Alongside things like Torus, and 3D Torus and 6D Torus. However, or Fat Tree. Dragonfly doesn't sound as intuitive as any of those.
No.
But a Dragonfly topology, so it's the way you connect the systems together in a high-performance computer, it's designed to minimize network traffic and cost.
It's meant to minimize the number of hops in between any one system.
And obviously, if you have a massive data center, you don't want to have 10 hops to get to the system you need.
I don't believe it's actually cost related. I think you actually spend more to do it than like a fat tree, but it's more performant than a fat tree.
I thought you were literally spending more on cables, maybe less on the switch.
But you still need fairly long cables for all the hop runs.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So it's so fat tree is, I think, best described as you have say in a standard GPU cluster is 8-way all to all, and you have several of those that are also all to all, maybe 8, maybe whatever. They connect to a switch, and you can have like 1,000 switches in a ring that are all to all. It's so your localized group is small, Then you have a slightly bigger local group, and then you have a massive, just global group.
Yeah.
I think it's local work, or local core and work group. And,
I don't know that working very well. So
yeah, it's something I need to do some research on. But the whole thing is, let's minimize connections. And one of the things we're just speaking about is wafer scale. And people are saying, well, this is like putting 48 GPUs on a wafer. Well, you also have to manage the connectivity between them. Can you do an all-to-all? Well, it turns out you can do Dragonfly on a wafer, and that's what this paper was about. I won't go through all the details, but it mentions Tofino too. Also NV switch. It just
pour one out for Tofino, boys.
Yeah. And this is kind of what it. So yeah, you have a chiplet on a wafer that becomes a C group. No, a chiplet on a package gets to a C group. Multiple C groups on a wafer, and multiple wafers in a cabinet, and then multiple cabinets become a system.
Yes.
And this is where we get, it's the total number of terminals based on the chiplets, and the maximum number of hops, and the expected latency based on optical cable or copper cable, and then the RDL layers of the chip, then the metal layers. So it's also coming into things like forward error correction, and how this is done.
And if you scroll up a bit, up, there's a table there. That table. If you want the chip radix and the SW radix and the number of switches and the cabinets and the number of processors and
yeah. So here it says like Dojo is like a 2D mesh and switch, which kind of looks like this. Edge IOs, and then you have to deal with all the connectivity in between. Then you have wafer level long distance interconnect. And yeah, this is basically what a Dragonfly looks like. And you're talking about all the cores, you're talking about all the C groups, all the W groups, and how all the W groups are connected together. And how do you minimize the routing? This sort of paper it's like a thought experiment, right? But actually how applying it to modern technology with what chips today have, and how would we do it? So for example, this is using like UCIe, for example, between chips. We've seen we've been to events where we've seen people saying, here's a wafer and you can just put your chips on it. We've managed the connections inside and we'll sell you this interposer sort of thing. This is kind of what that is, but taking it one
to the extreme
scale up. So here it's talking about 8 lanes of 112 gig SerDes are adopted at each C group channel, achieving 896 gigabit per second per port long reach bandwidth, and you're actually going down into the size. Mesh-based NOCs can provide a more scalable injection of bandwidth. Many recent multi-chip systems, including Sapphire Rapids, Wormhole, and Dojo, adopt such an architecture. So, it's not pie in the sky thinking. It's let's apply modern, relevant stuff. And then we can even talk about, parameters about what the bandwidth and latency is going to be. They simulate it with BookSim, which is one of the standard simulation packages. And I just wanted to highlight this just because one of the things that I spoke about last week with a number of people is how we get reconfigurable connectivity in standardized networking, and limitations, benefits of copper versus optical in the switching fabric, not just necessarily purely on latency. And then we get to things like Cyrus says, butter donut sounds tastier than Dragonfly. Butter donut referencing the paper from AMD a few years back about a potential way of interconnecting chiplets. That's quite interesting. And Jim from Adored TV has done a video on it. I've done a video on it. My video was quite late though. But yeah, I'm going to put this PDF in the comments. So if anybody wants to have a look, we can do that. So that's Waferscale. Let's bring it to, the weather. So
some of you...
okay. So this isn't Andrew Feldman. It's Andrew Friedman. And I last week I left the UK as Storm Boris was hitting, and I left the US as
Boris Johnson was hitting.
Yeah. So, if I leave somewhere, there's going to be weather. But George, you've been following this.
Yeah. So apparently my AC is audible, so I'll turn it off for now. So, as some of you may know, Hurricane Helene had hit the U.S., the southeastern coast. Current estimates are over 100 people have perished, unfortunately. But what is more relevant to us in the tech sphere is that NOAA, or the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, did not have data center redundancy on some of their big main systems because it was assumed that Asheville was not going to flood, not to this level. Now, for some of you guys, just to get a context, Asheville is about 450, 500 kilometers away from the nearest beach, and was about 800 kilometers away from when this storm first hit land. So while we knew that the storm was coming, we were not expecting it. Yeah, it was the impact to North Carolina was very much underestimated, along with to Georgia and neighboring states. But so this just goes to show that
so
you need data center redundancy, right?
So these data centers, do we know what they were used for?
No, we just know that NOAA's data center. So wherever NOAA was holding their data center went down. We don't know what data center it was, if it was a NOAA-based one or like a government-run one, or if it was AWS, Azure, one of them. We don't know.
So,
and it sounds like they have data backup, but they didn't have compute backup, which makes me think that it was a NOAA specific or a government specific data center that went down.
I thought government have redundancy in triplicate.
With regards to data, yes. With regards to compute, less so.
I've got a feeling that might change, or at least at the state level.
Yeah, well, NOAA is not state. NOAA is federal.
No, but I mean, whatever sites they choose, they have to at least have 2 other sites.
Yeah. And I do apologize if you hear my AC. It's quite hot in this room right now. So if you hear my AC, I do sincerely apologize, but it's quite hot in here.
You're just contributing to climate change. That's what that is.
Yes, but it's unfortunately I have 4 systems running stuff.
Some of which you can't talk about.
No, I can talk about all of them. I've literally
No, you meant to say no. That way you can keep the tension. That's how that goes. But yeah, NOAA's saying they're still trying to take, working to account for all of its employees and staff. However, phone and internet have also gone down in certain areas. I think they're coming back up now.
Yeah, they're starting to come back.
But I think it, along with some of the stuff we've mentioned, especially with like the Cerebras IPO and whatever, it's important to realize that parts of the supply chain, how weather affected they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean just like pandemic affected. Not only weather, we've got geopolitical ways they can be affected. So if you're, okay, this is NOAA right now. Climate scientists and meteorologists. That data is still needed to help plan for flights, to help plan for out into the future, and it affects things like what crops should be grown where and how that's going to change over time. So plans need to be put in place with all this.
Fun fact: NOAA is actually one of the 8 uniformed parts of the U.S. military.
But it's not just weather. If this happened, if this happened to say at Intel's advanced packaging facility, then suddenly we have no Intel chips for a few months. Or if Taiwan gets a tsunami the size that hit Japan, we all know how much of a supply chain issue that tsunami hitting Japan happened, especially with things like ABF. One of the key components in high performance chip design. When you've only got one factory in the world doing it and it catches fire, perhaps
you have a problem
to make it somewhere else. So when people talk about dual sourcing and multi-sourcing their stuff, this is what they're trying to de-risk, essentially. The thing is, even if you de-risk and one of your sources disappears, it means the other source suddenly gets more expensive, right? So it's not just data, it's not just compute, it's also key parts of building all these chips, but then also power infrastructure, right? Power and communications. It's I was saying a couple of weeks ago about the how one grandmother in Georgia managed to disconnect the entire internet for Armenia by digging up cables she thought was spare copper, or trying to strip copper out of cables, and it just turned out to provide the whole of Armenia with internet. Where's the redundancy, right? And that's just that sort of nation. It matters. I'm pretty sure if so when cell towers go down, the amount of screaming from iPad kids who can't suddenly watch Cocomelon, it's imagine that but multiplied by 100.
Yes. And speaking of the supply chain, there is a specific facility in North Carolina that deals with quartz, and this is high purity quartz.
Let's see if properly. Okay. George, you still there?
Yes.
Did I pause? So this is actually something that I've been looking into recently because I've been working with a company who's trying to compete against quartz. Quartz, as we know, is piezoelectric. It helps generate a frequency when pressure or voltage is applied. And so in order for your systems to have accurate timing, you need high precision quartz, basically. It is one of the few things inside the system that is not silicon. And as a result, you literally need to grind and polish your quartz crystals to vibrate at the right frequency and get the right features. Turns out a lot of systems, most systems still use quartz today. The up and coming thing is silicon-based microelectrical mechanical timing, MEMS. But most of the market is still supplied by quartz, and you need high performance quartz for high performance chips. And what do we speak about?
You need high purity, and by high purity, we're talking about 99.999%
Yeah,
pure.
you need it pure to get the high performance and to get the desired characteristics as well. So, and so one of the areas of flooding was Tennessee, not TSMC, Tennessee. And this area, Spruce Pine, is apparently very contains some high purity quartz for the semiconductor market.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a question as to whether a disruption in this market would have a knock-on effect to the supply chain. Just like when the invasion of Ukraine happened and people said, what's going to happen to the argon supplies or the wheat supplies, right?
Mm-hmm.
It turns out if you build enough redundancy into the supply chain, knocking out one source doesn't matter. And the team at Semi-Analysis have a tweet thread about the fact that it doesn't particularly matter for them. And I'm not going to be able to read the rest of the tweet, but I'll put a link in here. It's Ogden the Bold says, now all the sand is too smooth. I actually just watched a video on YouTube from, was it Engineering Connections? I'm going to have
Technology Connections?
No. Practical Engineering. He's got a 20-minute video on, is the world running out of sand or soft sand? And the answer is technically yes, but it doesn't matter because we can make rough sand like soft sand. So, it's... I've got a video coming up, an interview with the CEO of a MEMS timing company that's actually getting some traction in devices like 800 gig Ethernet switches. So stay tuned for that. I think that's going live next week. We're almost done with that video, so that's fun. But that's what is looking to replace quartz in the future, such that we don't ever have this sort of situation become more of an issue globally, or at least that's one of the business angles. We should probably speak about Llama 3.2, just because that was released this week, and the Llama 3, the Llama models, the open source models are very popular. Every time we speak to companies, they always mention how fast they are on Llama, how they can be optimized for Llama. And we had Llama 3, then Llama 3.1, and now we have Llama 3.2. And the focus of Llama 3.2 is edge AI and vision. So this is speaking about on-device with low amounts of parameters, 1 billion, 3 billion. So this is essentially your chatbot or your code assistant, meaning it only needs 1 to 3 gigabytes of memory, or can run on the MPU. Or we have multimodal, where we can do text and image and audio and all the variants in between. Instead of needing 400 billion parameters, we only need 90 or 11. So this is what Llama 3.2 is focusing on. Small and medium-sized vision LLMs. Let's see if I can get this bigger so people can read. And we have text-only models at 1 to 3 and more multimodal at 11 and 90. Meta is providing pre-trained and instruction-tuned versions with 128K context length. That means it can remember essentially 128,000 tokens, or about 100,000 words, which is quite substantial even compared to what we can get online right now. What impressed me here is that line. These models are enabled on day one for Qualcomm and MediaTek hardware and optimized for ARM processors, meaning that they have gone out of their way to ensure hardware optimization on Qualcomm and MediaTek as the announcement drops. Normally, they just do the announcement, and then it's up to Qualcomm and MediaTek to go do the enhancements, to go do the optimizations, or people who are very familiar with the hardware. Now, Meta's doing it themselves. And basically saying, we've got you, bud. especially for these sorts of models are going to be aimed at these sorts of devices. Yeah. Smartphone with 8, 12, 16 gig.
Although I don't have a MediaTek or a Qualcomm device, so
well, Samsung doing Samsung things, or Apple doing Apple things.
Google doing Google things.
Yeah. Whereas I run a MediaTek 9300, so and the announcement today is essentially working closely with the partners to enable Llama Stack. So this whole thing about working with Llama because it's so popular, how do we reduce the friction to enabling it? So these are all ready to download at llama.com or at Hugging Face, and they'll be available on all sorts of partners. Interesting one they've listed here is Grok. So it looks like Grok's already got a Llama 3.2 in the works. There's not going to be a 405 billion parameter of 3.2. That's in the 3.1. So these are frontier models. And this is what essentially people take through fine-tuning or model parameter tuning, the stuff that Llama and I are doing. And then you apply RAG on top of that and a number of other features to get them to be more accurate. So I could definitely see like a 1 billion parameter model being used to help search through photos locally or, The Llama 3.2 release, we're also working with on-device partners ARM, MediaTek, and Qualcomm to offer a broad range of services at launch. So Qualcomm's Tech Summit is next month.
Isn't it this month? Isn't it the 14th?
No, 21st.
21st.
I'm not going this year because I need to renew my visa on that day. Literally, that's the day I'm getting having my interview with the US embassy. And then I know MediaTek's got one or two things coming up as well. So it sounds like both of them are going to be hard pushing Llama 3.2. The only hope I have is that they actually show it useful. It's all very well saying we support this, but actually show it to me in a way that's useful, right? We're always talking about the killer app on mobile devices. We're talking about through all AI PC. And with images and with convolutional neural networks, it makes sense, right? But we still need a decent use case for LLMs on device to make it worthwhile. Why should people be invested in it? And friend of the show, Mr. Vitis, says he's doing his undergrad thesis right now, and Llama 3.1 is one of the models he uses. Well, maybe you can use it on your phone as well now. So, and he's wondering whether he should include 3.2. So the lightweight models can do multilingual text as well. That's quite good. For example, such an application could summarize the last 10 messages received. I've been playing a bit with, say, Google Gemini with my email, being a case of asking it,
like summarize.
What are the most urgent emails I need to respond to?
Yeah.
No. It's like, what invoices do I still need to send?
Oh, okay.
Or what meetings should I have today? And then it will turn around and say, I don't have access to your calendar. I'm like, no, but you've got access to my email, and my email has the calendar invites. Or things like that. It's not great. In individualized context within a singular email is good. It just has trouble going beyond that, and I think that's to do with context length and whatever. But yeah, it's vision instruction tutor benchmark. So using LLMs for images, or this is a multimodal one that could do images and text, and then the lightweight one with tools and reasoning. And you can see, right, especially here, to just take this MMLU benchmark. The 3 billion gets 63.4. This one gets, 15 less, pretty much. So what's that? 25% less. That doesn't sound that great. But as we said earlier, if you with the 135 million parameter model, if you can do that and save the power and it's right, it's actually cheaper to do this several times.
Yeah,
than it is to do the big model once, and you just do a simple check on it. So yeah, I'll put this this link in the chat, so if people want to read what's going on with 3.2 image understanding demo, and then some lightweight models, and it goes into detail about how it's being done and what's going on under the hood. Can you put do your chats in, or have a group chat, and then at the end just basically summarize what we decided.
Yeah.
Which that's useful.
I don't know how I feel about that one, because sometimes it's going to miss context that a group chat will have. Like, especially if there's like a lot of friend-specific language that the LLM would have no idea about.
Yeah. Also, I don't know. I tend conversations because I keep attentive. I mean, if you're an idiot, maybe, or if you're not part of a conversation of a week, then maybe that's more useful. Or you wake up and you ask your AI, you ask your assistant, what's the weather like, and did I get any messages overnight, and it will tell you about how Aunt Freda and Aunt Kathy started arguing in the family chat about sensible things while both of them were drinking tequila. I don't know.
Sounds like
but then it has to answer that well. So yeah.
Some experience with that.
No, I'm all good. I'm just postulating hypotheticals.
Yes, hypotheticals.
Yeah. So that's Llama. One thing I wanted to touch on is, did I get it here? This. Our good friends over at Gamers Nexus have done a video about Intel's Arizona fabs. It's an hour long. And they clearly got some video access of the fabs. I wonder if I can actually show some of the video on stream without getting... yeah. Oh, no. No, it's giving me ads. Typical. Yeah. It didn't give me an ad, then it refreshed and gave me an ad. It says that we haven't given you
an ad, guys.
So yeah, they went to Arizona where they're just building up. You can't actually get the screenshot that it's showing you, can you? Yeah. So they're in the process of constructing their fabs, and we covered last tech routine or the tech routine before that. Yeah, while they are reducing the investment overseas, they're delaying it a couple of years. All the stuff in the US is still full steam ahead, and that includes build out Arizona. So that's mostly new fab and new packaging facilities, if I remember correctly.
It's finishing up Fab 42 and building out Fab 52 and 62, if I remember correctly.
This is the most vital part of any construction project.
Yes.
I liked that as a great joke at the beginning. They got to tour around, all the facilities, it seems, and what's amusing? No, it's not amusing, I guess, because so they have accuracy fact checkers for the video. They fully accept that manufacturing is not in their core expertise. And they went and they spoke to a number of experts, and a lot of people at Intel helped. Some of these people are no longer working at Intel. They took the voluntary redundancy last month and actually announced on social media yesterday that they've taken the severance package. So it's a shame that some of these people, while involved in this video, are no longer there.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, the people who I know are really good, I'm trying to make sure that they get jobs elsewhere in the industry. But this video, the timestamps is construction, water, the FOOPs, the superhighway, the automated system, how you fab, what exactly is lithography, what's a photoresist, what's deposition, what's ion implantation. Like I say, it's a proper, we know we're in tech, but we've never actually had to properly think about this, because this isn't what we've been educated on. This isn't what we spend our days in and out doing. And construction is one thing, and then they've got a few experts on camera speaking about water. They actually get to go into the fab, and then they get another ad, of course. I've been in 7 or 8 fabs, and I'll be honest, the leading edge ones all kind of look the same. I've not been in like any non-leading edge. The least leading edge I've been into was Intel's Israel, and that only did 14 nanometer, 14 and 10, and maybe a bit of 7. So it's this is going through again. It's definitely well worth a watch. Definitely go. Steve and the team do a great job here. I need to speak to the team, because the last time I did a fab tour was when they did the high NA EUV machine, and the way it worked there is the only people who could take in cameras was CNBC, I think. But Bloomberg were there, the Oregonian were there, and a few local media were there as well, and me. Because CNBC were the only people who could take in cameras, we had to use their footage, and then Intel gave us a bunch of footage as well. But Gamers Nexus seems to have cracked open a safe somewhere with the heralded content B-roll.
Yeah.
It's because they've got so many different B-roll images here from Intel. It's pretty sure somebody's basically said, "Here's our library, go ham," and I've never been able to get that access. And I'm one of Intel's consultants, and I still can't get it. It's more.
I mean, I've been
ads,
to
of course,
the fab in Arizona. Not inside. I've just been on the outside. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go in, but it's a massive facility. It's huge, and one day I would love to go inside and explore. But yeah, get to see all the tools. And from what I understand, it's not like you'll actually be able to understand like what's going on inside the machine, because lots of it is all like not walled off, but like blocked off and whatnot, and you need to see the cameras inside. But the
one when you go in as a tour, because you can't use regular paper and pens, because paper gives off too many particles. Mm-hmm. So they give you a vinyl notebook and a special pen to write on a vinyl notebook. Mm-hmm. So I spend half my time obviously listening to whatever the person's saying, because sometimes they say stuff that's new, but then writing down all the equipment that's being used, and then going and do the research to find out exactly what they're used for. Especially if you know a good number of the processes down the line of what exactly are used. I did a video at the Intel fab in Oregon, D1X Mod 3, when it was being installed. And one of the things I did there, what I was allowed to do is do a video of how to put on your bunny suit. It was like a really stupid 7-minute video of how do you what do you have to do to get into a fab? Because we see Steve here in the traditional bunny suit garb. You'll notice that some of the areas here are yellow and some of them are white. That's because in the yellow areas it's a lot more photosensitive based on what the processes are. It's getting to a point now where some of the processes in the fabs require you to be under a consistent environment and vacuum, going from so instead of going from machine to machine to machine in a constant vacuum, you essentially have one big machine that puts 5 processes together. And companies like Applied Materials, deal in that sort of stuff. So I'm a big advocate for getting people into fabs, right? I'm not going to learn much new in these sorts of videos, but I know, especially for people like Steve, this is like the first opportunity, or maybe it's the second opportunity he's had to go into a high manufacturing facility and stuff that's in a state of construction. But he will see things that I didn't, that I never have. And it's great to give that opportunity because there'll always be people who won't know this stuff. They don't realize how deep the rabbit hole goes. One of the great comments on here when I was watching it earlier, hopefully it's still, after watching this, I would never complain about 5% performance difference. The complexity of the production is insane. I would never disrespect silicon manufacturers ever again, right? You're putting a wafer through this massive facility. It's spending, best part of 3 months going through, doing, over 100 layers, 120 layers, to the high performance part. And you come out of a wafer with only 40 physical defects. But trillions of transistors on a single wafer, it's insane, right?
Well, and that's like whenever people are like, oh, this is only yielding 20% or 40%. It's like, do you know how insane it is to even say that on a process? On processes this advanced? That's insane.
And then you've got economics, right? One of the things later on in the video, Steve speaks to David Cantor, one of the industry analysts. He runs Real World Technologies, about speed and throughput, right? Because the question is, can we get chips through a fab faster? And yes, you can. It's called a hot shot. And this is...
I've heard it as a hot load.
Hot load, but basically you put a wafer, or you get a set of wafers that are basically deemed priority 1, which means that their whole process from end to finish means that they come out of one machine and go straight into another, come out of that machine, go straight into another, come out of the machine, go straight into another. Normally, in order to maximize throughput, you might have something that goes into a machine, then goes off to storage for a couple of hours, then comes back when a machine's free, right? By having a hot shot, you guarantee that it's literally end to end to end to end is constantly moving and constantly being processed.
And
so you get that through faster. The thing is, you may have to make a machine idle for a little bit so that it's ready, and as a result, your activity, the utility of the fab goes down from 94% to 92%, whatever. And the whole point is, when you're 1% of load, 1% of utility in a fab can cost millions of dollars per day running. You have to decide whether that hot shot is worth it, whether it's a new early chip you have to do.
And
you can't do all chips at that speed.
And I guarantee you that chips like Zen 5 compute chiplet, MI300X, all the Xeons, NVIDIA's data center products, all of them have probably gone through a hot shot before, right? Just because that's something that needs to hit certain milestones in terms of time.
yeah, it's. I mean, one of Pat Gelsinger's things when he enabled IDM 2.0 was that we don't want our teams doing so many hot shots because it slows the fab down to do it.
Yeah.
It also costs a lot of money to do it.
Yeah.
And we need to make these teams accountable. I'm actually surprised he got shots like this and didn't have to blur much of it out. The EMO button is not an EMO button. When you press it, it doesn't turn into a goth rave. Yes, that's the emergency off button. Don't lean on it. You could cost the fab a few million. But no, you can go into so many details with materials and deposition rates and thermals and how you process wafers.
And then it's the physics of how does a semiconductor work will drive you insane because it's so complicated, and it's in this weird position between like classical and not classical physics.
So this is why I attend IEEE events like IEDM and ISSCC, devices and circuits, because those are the sorts of events where you get to learn about some of the newest technologies that are going into the manufacturing. And I'm still learning years and years later of attending these events. I don't go to those events to do content. If I get content out, then it's great. I do it for my own personal learning. I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I can take a couple of weeks out a year just to go learn and speak to companies and try and tell other companies not to hold events during these very critical industry research symposia. But it's, the rabbit hole is deep and you can dive deeper. It's one of the things they say in the video is that from fab construction to end chip, nobody knows the full process.
No,
right? It's so complex from end to end. That's why it requires 1 million people in research and 100,000 people doing this and 10,000 people doing this and 1,000 people doing this as you get narrower and narrower into these specialties. You've got the research bodies like IMEC and Fraunhofer doing lots of research on that side. You've got IBM doing IBM's research in smaller process node geometries and gate-all-around technologies and stuff like that. This video is a good hour of your time if you're interested in any of that stuff. It does a good job at a high-level overview, going into a lot of places that most people don't get to see, especially George.
I would love to go into a fab one day, but
we'll try and get you in one.
Hopefully soon.
We did have a couple of other topics. There's some like bendy RISC-V chips now. We might leave it for another day. And some more AI chips. But yeah. I think we were the first few episodes of TechPotato. We had the benefit of large launches and large architecture disclosures. So
and now we're it's
news of the day, right? TSMC's event we went through at the beginning. AMD doing this announcement with Oracle on the chips. We had Gamers Nexus doing Intel Arizona. That could have been this week. That could have been next week. The weather, Llama 3.2, Cerebras IPO. Next week we have a choice, and we should perhaps put it to the community. Do you want us to have a Tech Poutine before AMD's event where we can't AMD, or after AMD's event where we can? Maybe we even have to speak to AMD and see if we can live stream at the event. With a stage, and we can bring
that would be spicy.
We have to bring on the PC World guys because I keep going on there, so they have to come onto ours.
my vote is either during or after, because then we can actually talk about what we're there for and our thoughts.
So that's next week. That'll be on Wednesday next week then.
Yeah.
No, sorry, Thursday.
Yes, Thursday.
Thursday next week.
I fly in on Wednesday, which is what's confusing.
Yeah, I've got meetings Tuesday and Wednesday. I maybe guys early next week as well. And I've got some meetings with some very interesting individuals that I can't name. Maybe able to name them next week. Not for content, just interesting meetings. But we'll see on that. So let's move into the Q&A portion in case anybody has any questions from the show. I did see somebody say about how they wouldn't be able to fit in without losing a few kilos of water into a bunny suit.
Yeah.
So to say about the small models, yes, they target the 40 top Copilot chips for these small models. This has been an interesting conversation I've been having recently about Microsoft says they want 40 tops, and yet if anybody else wants to play on those chips, the chip has to have or force use 40 if needs. So this is why we're getting chips with 45, 47, 50. So yeah, the small models may be able to fit in that sort of tops range. So Solid Reactor also asks about glass substrates helping Cerebras in the future. So glass substrate core, the sort of 2030 technology about replacing the PCB, the middle bit. If you turn it into glass, the whole point about moving it to glass isn't to move it to optical. It's because you can put copper in glass, and it's got better characteristics than the vinyl circuit boards that we use, and you can get better density of connections.
So speaking of glass substrate, Corning had an announcement about that earlier today, yesterday, about EUV glass that can stand up to EUV processes.
Sorry, say that again.
Glass that can stand up to EUV processes in the increased radiation. And yeah.
Huh. I did see that. You remember Nikon last year started speaking about nano imprint lithography?
Yes.
And I publicly admonished the paper for being misinterpreted by the press. Because what Nikon had done is they'd got a graph with some points, and they extrapolated a line down to 1 nanometer, even though they had no points. And when I tried to ask information, they were deceptively evasive. And then, as I read and understood the paper more, it turns out that their technology is meant, what they were showcasing was meant to be essentially feature size agnostic. So it was saying nothing about how. There's actually been some news of that. It turns out that Intel, a number of investors, are investing in nano imprint lithography, or at least investing in concept.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So this is. So I've been to the Corning Museum of the Corning Factory in Corning, New York, since I went to college in upstate New York. But yeah, so this is, to quote the press release, Corning designed Extreme ULE glass, which is the name of the new glass, to withstand the highest intensity extreme ultraviolet lithography, including high numerical aperture, high NA, EUV, which is rapidly becoming an industry standard. EUV lithography allows manufacturers to use the most advanced photomasks to pattern and print the smallest, most complex chips designs. These processes requires extreme thermal stability and a uniform glass material to help ensure consistent manufacturing performance.
Oh, a consistent glass material. So you can't have a prepared glass material unless it's uniform. That may be a limitation.
Huh. So this is about improving photomasks. Very interesting stuff.
If we go down the rabbit hole of photo masks, and that in itself is multiple PhDs worth of information. So, Mr. Vipitis asks, is the Qualcomm A100 Ultra a real product? I haven't found it anywhere to buy. HPE lists it as H2. It is real. I have seen them.
So
whether you can get them or not,
a few tier 3, tier 4 clouds that you can find them and get access to them on. But other than that, I haven't seen them for sale.
No, I don't think there's an impetus to actually sell them, quote, quote, retail. It's just as part of a cloud instance offering. Interesting that you say HPE lists it as H2 as second half of the year, because technically that's like a 4-year-old chip.
Yeah, the AI 100 Ultra is a weird.
It's I do some work with Qualcomm, so trying to crowbar that out of them has been difficult. But I am working on it. I try. Okay. I think we're out of the questions. Mr. Vipitis asked, is Poutine meant to be a weekly show? We're trying. We just can't be consistent because I'm traveling all the time.
Yeah.
And so we only give everybody an hour's notice if we're lucky. We're trying to be better on that, but we'll see. But I think that's going to be all from this week's episode of the Tech Poutine. Again, tune in next week, where we will be at AMD's Advancing AI Everywhere, or whatever it's called, event, where we can talk about new AI stuff, and maybe because we'll be in person, we can get some gravy on board and get a guest in. So I've been your host, Ian, known as Potato.
And I am George, also known as Cheese.
And we'll catch you on the next one.
Have a good one, folks.